Ella's Christmas Quest, Finding Santa to Say Thank You. The snowflakes drifted gently from the sky, blanketing the village in shimmering white. In the heart of this village lived a little girl named Ella. She was 7 years old, with golden curls that peeked from under her knitted hat, and eyes as bright as the North Star. Ella had a heart full of kindness, and more than anything, she believed in the magic of Christmas. Every year, Santa Claus left the most thoughtful gifts for Ella beneath the Christmas tree. But this year, something felt different. Ella didn't just want to receive presents. She wanted to give something back. She wanted to thank Santa in person for all the joy he had brought her and the other children. So, on the night before Christmas, Ella made up her mind. She was going to find Santa. Slipping into her warmest coat and boots, Ella tiptoed downstairs. The fireplace glowed softly, casting long shadows across the room. Her parents were fast asleep, and her little brother snored gently in his crib. Ella wrapped a small box in red paper, a gift for Santa filled with homemade cookies she had baked with her mother. As she stepped outside, the snow crunched beneath her feet. The village square was quiet, save for the twinkling lights that adorned the trees. Ella knew from stories that Santa lived far, far away at the North Pole. She imagined his sleigh soaring through snowy clouds and his workshop bustling with elves. But how was she supposed to get there? Did she need magic, or would her determination be enough? Her first stop was the home of Mr. Whiskers, the village's oldest cat. Legend had it that Mr. Whiskers had once seen Santa flying through the sky. "Do you know how I can find Santa?" she whispered. The old cat yawned lazily and flicked his tail towards the forest at the edge of the village. Ella took it as a sign and set off toward the trees, her footprints vanishing behind her. The forest was enchanting but eerie under the moonlight, with shadows dancing across the snow and the faint rustling of leaves echoing through the quiet night. The crisp air carried the scent of pine, and each step crunched softly beneath Ella's boots, the sound magnified in the stillness. Icicles hung like chandeliers from the branches, and the wind whispered through the pines. As Ella ventured deeper, she heard soft footsteps in the snow. Turning around quickly, she found herself face to face with a small reindeer. "Hello there," Ella said softly, reaching out her hand. The reindeer nuzzled her palm, and Ella noticed a tiny bell hanging from its neck. "You must be one of Santa's reindeer. Can you take me to him?" The reindeer tilted its head, as if considering her request, then began to trot ahead. Ella followed, her excitement growing with each step. They walked for what felt like hours until they reached a frozen lake, shimmering like glass under the stars. But as they crossed, the ice began to creak and groan. Ella's heart pounded. She tried to move carefully, but a loud crack split the silence. Ella gasped as her foot slipped and she tumbled onto the ice. The reindeer quickly rushed to her side, nudging her gently to stand. "Thank you," she breathed, steadying herself. They hurried across the lake, reaching the other side just as the ice splintered behind them. On the other side of the lake stood a tall, crooked tree, its branches glimmering with frost. Nestled in its hollow was a small owl, blinking at Ella with wide, wise eyes. "Excuse me, Mr. Owl," Ella said politely. "I'm looking for Santa. Do you know where I might find him?" The owl hooted softly, fluttering down to a lower branch. He pointed his wing towards the mountains that loomed in the distance. Ella glanced at the towering peaks, feeling a flicker of doubt. Could she really climb those mountains all by herself? But just as she began to worry, the reindeer lowered itself to the ground, inviting Ella to climb onto its back. She carefully climbed up, and the reindeer began to gallop towards the mountains. The wind rushed past her cheeks, and Ella clung tightly, feeling both thrilled and nervous. As they reached the base of the mountains, a snowstorm began to swirl around them. The path ahead was barely visible, and the reindeer slowed to a cautious walk. Snowflakes stung Ella's face, and her fingers began to grow numb. "We have to keep going," she whispered, though part of her wished she were back at home by the fire. Just as her hope began to waver, Ella felt the cold seeping deeper into her bones and doubt creeping into her heart. Her eyes filled with tears, and she wondered if she had come all this way for nothing. But then a warm light flickered through the storm, cutting through the darkness like a beacon of hope. Ella squinted, and to her amazement, she saw a small cottage nestled in the snow. Smoke curled from its chimney, and golden light poured from the windows. The reindeer led Ella to the front door, and she hesitated for a moment before knocking softly. The door creaked open, and standing there was none other than Mrs. Claus. "Oh, my dear," Mrs. Claus exclaimed, ushering Ella inside. "What brings you out in this cold night?" Ella removed her hat, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "I'm looking for Santa. I wanted to thank him in person." Mrs. Claus smiled warmly and handed Ella a cup of hot cocoa. "Santa is out delivering presents right now, but he'll be back very soon. Why don't you warm up by the fire?" Ella nodded gratefully, sinking into a cozy armchair. The warmth of the fire seeped into her bones, and her eyelids began to droop. Just as she was about to drift off, the door swung open with a burst of cold air. Santa himself stepped inside. His red suit dusted with snowflakes. His eyes twinkled like stars, and his hearty chuckle filled the room with warmth. Well, what do we have here?" Santa said, his voice gentle but resonant. "Ella, isn't it? You've come a long way. What brings you all the way to the North Pole on this chilly night?" Ella sprang to her feet, clutching the small red box in her hands. Her cheeks flushed as she shyly held it out to him. "I wanted to thank you, Santa," she said earnestly. "You've brought so much happiness to me and so many others. I made you these cookies as a gift." Santa's face lit up with joy as he carefully accepted the box. He opened it to reveal the beautifully decorated cookies. "Why, Ella, these are wonderful," he exclaimed. "But even more wonderful is your kind heart. It's not often that someone goes on such a brave journey just to say thank you." Mrs. Claus beamed from her seat by the fire. "You've done something truly special, dear. The spirit of Christmas isn't just about receiving gifts, it's about spreading love and gratitude, just like you have." Ella felt a warmth in her heart that rivaled the fire crackling in the hearth. She looked up at Santa and said, "I just wanted you to know how much you mean to all of us. You bring magic into our lives, and I wanted to bring a little magic to you, too." Santa knelt down and placed a gentle hand on Ella's shoulder. "Thank you, Ella," he said. "You've reminded me why I do what I do. The joy of Christmas isn't just in the presents. It's in moments like these, filled with love and kindness." With a wink, Santa handed Ella a golden bell from his sleigh. "Keep this with you, Ella. Whenever you hear its ring, remember the magic of this night and the power of giving." Ella nodded, her eyes shining with happiness. She hugged Santa and Mrs. Claus tightly, feeling as if she were in the warmest place on earth. When it was time for her to leave, the reindeer was waiting patiently outside to take her home. As Ella climbed onto its back, she looked over her shoulder at Santa and Mrs. Claus waving from the doorway. "Merry Christmas!" she called out. "And a Merry Christmas to you, Ella," Santa replied, his voice carrying through the frosty air. As the reindeer soared across the snowy landscape, Ella held the golden bell close to her heart. She knew she would always treasure this adventure and the magical lesson it had taught her, that the true spirit of Christmas is found in love, gratitude, and the joy of giving.